After her husband was injured while deployed in Afghanistan, our guest today, Lindsey Schiro, immediately pivoted her entire career to helping veterans and their families. Having spent over 8 years working for nonprofits dedicated to providing support for veterans, Lindsey is now the CEO of 51 Vets, an organization focused on connecting transitioning and transition service members from elite military communities with leading business professionals. Thanks for joining us for this episode covering Lindsey's amazing story and her advice from helping thousands of people starting their next chapter after leaving the military. Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military.
I'm originally from Boston, so the snow makes me laugh, but other than that, it's pretty good.
Yeah, we get an inch and a half last night and school's out for like the whole week.
Oh yeah, my kids haven't had school all week. I'm ready to riot in front of the school building.
Yeah, that is, snow days take on a whole new definition when you have kids.
Yes, absolutely. And work from home. So
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's bundled up today. He's out in Hawaii and it's 59 degrees.
Yeah.
So
Rough
he's
life
freezing
out there.
over there.
No,
Yeah.
my kids were complaining about how cold it was because they're straight Hawaii kids now, so they just don't understand what the cold is. But yeah, 59, yeah, kind of a. I understand. I'm from Wisconsin, so I totally hear you.
Okay.
I know the cold very well, but yeah, it's kind of a nice reprieve from the hot weather. So
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I felt as more bad for you than I do, but I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, Griffin always gives me those alley-oops right at the beginning. It's Jackson, Hawaii, it's always fun.
Jack
Yeah.
just loves complaining about less than perfection. So have to give him the chance to do that every time we get. But, well, Lindsey, I appreciate you taking the time to hop on with us. Jack and I served together in the Army. We started this podcast because, like many others, you realize the transition process through the military leaves a little bit or a lot to be desired. And so we feel like there's a lot of options out there that people don't realize when they get out. And so we wanted to highlight some of those options by telling stories of people doing great things afterwards, highlighting people in organizations like yours that specifically help people that are transitioning out and going through that process. To start off on a slight tangent, I noticed you list former ballerina in your bio section. And one theme that we see through a lot of our episodes is a adjacent or separate skill set or experience that then contributes to later skill sets. So I'd love to, what's the background with ballerina? And I'm sure that there's been some like thread throughout your life that has been tied to that experience or that background.
So I was a ballerina for 22 years and wanted to move to New York when I was 19 to be a professional ballerina to dance with the New York Ballet. And my dad, who's a surgeon who served in the Navy, said, absolutely not, you will go to college. And so he crushed my hopes and dreams. And so that college trajectory and everything kind of led me to where I am now. So thanks, Dad. But yeah, definitely crushed some dreams for me when I was 19. Absolutely.
I have a similar story, but mine was enlisted Marine. My dad was like, no, you're not enlisting in the Marine Corps. You go to college. That was crushing dreams all around.
Yeah, it's what dads do.
Well, I imagine 22 years doing that sort of activity, that's like a steely fortitude that probably has led to a mental mindset that has contributed to the way that you've approached everything, having suffered what I can imagine is, pain for a good deal of that time.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. There's definitely some pain associated with it.
Well, so your dad encouraged the college route. And so what was next for you? So you went to school and then became a nurse, correct? Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and the trajectory you followed?
Yeah, I thought I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. I student taught when I was hungover one day when I was a senior in college and decided that student teaching was not for me and kindergarten teaching was not for me. So I left college, went to nursing school, was a pediatric nurse in Boston. I'm originally from Boston for a few years. Absolutely loved it. Loved the medical field. And then I met my husband at the time, who was an active duty Green Beret. And so I moved down to Florida with him. And then he was shot in Afghanistan in 2014 and lost his best friend alongside of him. And his whole team was affected. And so that was my trajectory to getting into the nonprofit sector. So that's kind of my catalyst for where I ended up now.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. And so just not to we'll double click on some of those areas. But so your first experience teaching was on a hungover day with
Mhm.
elementary school kids. They're like young children that are rambunctious to begin with.
Correct, correct. Yes, that was
So
my first day student teaching. I student taught a second grade class my senior year of college, and I was very hungover. And halfway through the day, I was like, this is not for me. I can't do this for the rest of my life. And so thankfully, I was majoring in psychology and not education. So I had a little bit more of a broad scope to fall back on. But yeah,
you got a couple doors, advertently or inadvertently closed, that thankfully led you to
yes,
where you are today.
yes, exactly.
So when
Yeah.
you say the nonprofit route, did you start your own nonprofit or did you find an organization that you aligned with and kind of pursued that path? And like what went from then on?
So I started with the Green Beret Foundation. I worked with them. They were standing up a chapter of Special Forces Wives called the Steel Mags. And so I founded the chapter down in Florida at Eglin Air Force Base, 7th Group, and ran that. And then transferred up to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, ran that one. And then they hired me to run the nationwide wives. So there were about, I don't know, 1,500 or so wives in that group, and I ran the whole program for them for a few years. And then I transferred over to the Honor Foundation and stood up the Fort Bragg campus for the Honor Foundation for a couple years, and then landed at 51 Vets. And I've been at 51 Vets as a CEO for 2 years now.
What was it about your time at the Green Beret Foundation? Was it something you were looking to get more involved in, that you were eager to be actively involved, or was it like Lindsey's the most involved, interactive person? Let's see how much she's willing to take on. Was it kind of like that, the backdoor route?
No, I wouldn't take no for an answer. I saw how little support the wounded, ill, and injured got from nonprofit sectors, from the DoD, et cetera, how much PTSD affected the entire family, not just the service member, things of that nature. And so I started working with the Green Beret Foundation to kind of bring awareness to that and to bring awareness to the family side of things, what the family goes through when their service members injured, when they come back home from deployment. I did a congressional fellowship with an organization called Hill Vets and worked on Capitol Hill, writing legislation and speaking nationally on behalf of military families, the wounded, ill, and injured. So I just kind of found a path and didn't take no for an answer, and kept going until something was done about it for the most part. So
I love that. It's kind of necessary in those realms because, like you said, there's not enough attention focused on it. And it does take somebody with a mouthpiece and then just you will not say, take no for an answer. Like if you have that opportunity, where it's great that people like you can take that opportunity and then run with it because, it can be squandered very easily as well. So thank you for that. That's awesome. And I think it seems as though it is getting more focus and attention nowadays. And it's most likely because of people like you, right? Like actually putting the word out there and making sure people are aware of that. But there's more involvement from military in politics, and it just seems like it's kind of coming back a little bit where people are getting into leadership positions who are aware of these things. And it's great that you were able to do that. I feel like what do you like currently now as the CEO, like what are you focusing on and what are you guys trying to solve right now?
So, as a CEO of 51 Vets, we focus on, we're another nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit, and we support the special operations and aviation communities as they transition into the private sector, specifically in careers in finance and banking. So, private equity, investment banking, consulting, entrepreneurship, et cetera. We work as a closed club, and so you have to know someone in 51 Vets to gain admittance into 51 Vets. So we do all of our, strategic marketing of membership and things of that nature through word of mouth. We don't market largely. It's all through our members. We have over 500 members nationwide that we support, and they are either going into those sectors or going into higher education and getting their MBA, finishing their bachelor's degrees. So we support them in all those different facets as they get out.
So if someone's listening to this and they decide that 51 Vets sounds like a great organization, they'd like to try and be part of it, they just need to triangulate their way to connect with someone who's part of the organization to then have a chance of being part of it?
Truth be told, they can just email me. I'm currently the only employee of the organization, so they can email me or message me on LinkedIn, and I can set them up. We have a director of membership who handles all of our membership criteria and everything. So if they don't know anyone in 51 Vets, it's just a conversation with me to make sure they meet the criteria, and then we push them through. So
Awesome. And just to clarify, the kind of people that would be a fit are coming from special operations communities or aviation community that are looking at finance careers, be it private equity, venture capital, investment banking, maybe starting a company. Are those the kind of endeavors that they're looking at, or is it somebody who's maybe just trying to feel out what their next step is and thinks that this might be something that would give them some better?
we have both. So some members know exactly what they want to do, and they, go at it tenfold, and they know where they want to end up. And some members are in graduate school and are kind of figuring out their way and don't really know what sector they want to get into. So we cater to both.
Can you talk a little bit more about what it looks like to be a member? Does it involve in-person meetups, specific curriculum, that sort of stuff?
Sure. So we offer one-on-one mentorship with C-suite level executives. We have partnerships with some of the top global firms and organizations in private equity, investment banking, et cetera, around the country. And then as well as higher education. So, your top 10 MBA schools we have relationships with. But we offer a one-on-one mentorship to help guide them through the transition. We're more so networking. And so we're very focused on making connections. And so we have what we call city summits. And so 4 times per year, we go to a major metropolitan city. It's an all expense paid trip for our members who want to go. And they visit private equity firms, investment banks, consulting firms. There's happy hours, et cetera. And they network, gain exposure, meet people, get internships, jobs, et cetera. And so that's what we use our donor dollars for, those trips. There's also city meetups, as we call them, all around the country. We're heavily based, where graduate schools are, but we're all over the country, and they get together at bars or restaurants and have happy hours and meet other members and network with them and things like that too. So
I'll have to look and see if there's a Raleigh meetup. So if someone has already started maybe a career or a position after transitioning out of the military, but they're like, I kind of just landed in something that a recruiter put me in, have they missed the boat, or is it like they can still join and it doesn't have to be actively going through the transition process?
they're in for life. I don't mean that in like a creepy way, but they're in for,
You can't leave.
they're in. So we have members that are, have jobs and careers and are working full time. We have members that are still in the military that are just transitioning out or a year or so out from transitioning. We have members in graduate school. So we have a wide range, and we have members that have, started in one career path, like investment banking, and then said, this isn't for me. I want to get into consulting or private equity. And they pivot and change their trajectory, and we help them, make those connections and help them change that. So
100 or so members, are those the ones actively seeking the mentorship, and you guys connect them with others that can mentor them, or do some of them take on the role of the mentor as well?
I would say about 20% of our members take on the role as the mentor because they're actively working and they give back to the organization. They speak at our city summits. They, meet with members that are transitioning. But it creates a sense. The biggest thing about 51 Vets is what we get from our members is that it creates a sense of community. And so they're gaining the community that they may have lost in the military, being on the team. And so we try really hard to give it back to them. And so we have members that act as mentors to everything from the VA process to interview questions to graduate school essays, anything you can possibly think of.
Where does the name come from? I'm curious, 51, is there any significance behind the naming convention?
There is. When I was hired, I thought 51 Vets transitioned today. Turns out that's not true. The name comes from that you should give 51% of yourself and receive 49.
Is there a connection between you and Rob Carrillo?
I've known him through my work with different nonprofits, but there's no direct connection between 51 Vets and him, no.
Okay, because he actually, I think he said that on the podcast. We just recorded a podcast with him.
Oh, nice.
A week or two ago, and that was one of the things he said is give more than 50%. But that's so true, and we've talked about that in the past. If you're on the side of gaining the mentorship, right, you have to seek it out and you have to be a part. You can't just receive. You have to try to provide value, and that's the best way to earn the right to be at the table, so to speak. But that's awesome. How do you guys fundraise to actually pay for the things that your organization's trying to do?
So I am primarily the fundraiser, and we do that by partnering with different firms and organizations. And so they come on as corporate sponsors. They pay a fee and they get access to our members. And so we get job descriptions from them. We send them resumes of members looking for jobs. We've partnered with firms that have created internships specifically for 51 vets and 51 vets only. And so we have partnered with firms that sponsor our city summits that will pay for some members to come out. We also have grants. We got a grant from Google last year that helped us significantly because we work in higher education and continuing education for veterans. And so there's a couple different streams of income that help support our mission, but primarily it's through corporate donations and individual donors that sponsor our members.
I'm sure that's an endless fight to try to get more and more support, and I'm sure you're quite busy doing that. But that's
quite
great.
Busy.
It must be quite fulfilling though too. I mean, I'm sure with the 500 members, I hope you're getting a lot of feedback on how valuable, just even if it's an elite organization, of course, like all the people that you're bringing on are, have been in elite organizations, but just getting 500 people together, just getting 500 random people together is an entirely, it's a difficult task. So the fact that you guys have been able to do what you've done. How long have you been part of the organization?
2 years.
Okay.
2 years now. So it was founded 5 years ago by a guy named Jordan Selleck, who was an investment banker and read a book on Navy SEALs, like we all do, because they all write books, and read a book on Navy SEALs and was interested in the correlation between special operations and the finance world. And so he turned into an entrepreneur, now runs a marketing firm for the private equity and finance world, but is chairman of the board and is still heavily involved in supporting 51 Vets members. So until we got started.
Awesome.
For anyone out there that's wondering, or like me, got stuck on how many vets transition out each day, since it's not 51, we found out. A quick Google has determined that it's roughly 1,300, which doesn't sound correct. I think 200,000 veterans, obviously very give or take, leave the military annually. So if you 200,000 divided by 365 days, it's like 540, 550 or so are leaving every single day, including weekends and holidays. So that is a lot of people. That is a massive number of people to serve. So yeah, I don't know where Google got 1,300, but that's a staggering number leaving every single day. And to your point, Lindsey, I love the fact that you said the whole, Jack and I have talked on previous conversations about when you leave, there's three things that you're lacking and they're pretty important to find. One is tribe, the other is purpose, and the third is security, or like financial stability kind of thing. And so we think finding a tribe through an organization like this is critically important, because like in the military, it's pretty much handed to you whatever unit you're at, but it takes a lot more dedicated effort when you leave. And finding an organization like 51 Vets or similar is a great way to have, you mentioned happy hours in your local area, finding people with like-minded background, experience, and that are pursuing similar things in the future and might have a shared kind of purpose or pursuit of purpose afterwards. I think that's just so critically important. And I couldn't recommend more highly to someone to get involved with an organization like this. And even if you feel like I just got out, I have plenty of purpose, I want to kind of separate myself from the military community, I think 99% of people will find that the longer they're out, the more they want to connect back into it and connect back to people that are thinking very similarly and have a lot of future ambitions that kind of overlap and are similar as well. So I think this is such a great piece of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what our members find a lot, is the sense of community, one, the identity that we help with, because they are not sure what they want to do after the military, which goes along with purpose, and then finding their next role. And then obviously the financial security of landing a job in a career field that they want, at a salary range that they want. So we try to meet all those metrics for them. If they, want to stay in Hawaii and work in private equity, we're going to network with them and help them find that job. And so we definitely try to meet them where they're at so they can get everything they need at a transition.
Not to, you can approach this in the most politically correct way you would like to, but what is the difference? There's so many organizations. What's the main key difference between what 51 Vets does versus the Honor Foundation versus, I know you guys have a partnership with the Commit Foundation that you recently announced. What are some of the key differentiators and who is a better fit for each of these? And maybe I'm sure there's, there's endless others that could be mentioned here, but just so people, I know each one serves a particular niche.
Absolutely. So we have partnered with the Commit Foundation just because they offer one-on-one mentorship. They're an incredible organization, and their values and their mission set and, who they support and everything was why we partnered with them to offer more of a holistic approach. We can't cover down on everything. I'm one employee. I have a volunteer team of 4 who help make the world go around with me, but we can't cover down on everything. And so we partner with the Commit Foundation to kind of fill in holes and offer a more holistic approach to transition. It's the same reason we partnered with the SOFT Network, which offers mental health counseling for those going through transition, to give our members that support as well. But we differ from places like the Honor Foundation and Special Operations Transition Foundation, if you will, because we're more network based. So many of our members have already gone through SOTIF or THF. They know what they want to do. They know their trajectory they want to be on, and they're just looking for connections and networking to help them get there. We partner with, firms that help with resumes or essays for graduate school, but we don't offer any type of classes for that. We're much more networking connection based. And so we're the type of nonprofit where they've figured out what they want to do, they know where they want to end up, and they come to us for that connection and network building and those city summits.
So amazing that's the focus, because so often I'm sure those other organizations, and this isn't a knock on them at all, but I'm sure they get bogged down by helping like the lowest common denominator, somebody like resume building, right? But there are a certain subset of people that have already figured it out. They just need that extra like PhD level assistance to get that, that introduction, and then they're going to take it and run with it just based on their personalities. Is there anything that your organization does for spouses, or do you know any organizations for military spouses that are kind of similar or something like that? I just feel like you're in the realm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Commit Foundation actually has a spouse program that they offer for military spouses, which is a great program. Hire Heroes USA has one for spouses. There's a couple other ones that help with spouses and finding gainful employment. We support spouses. I talk to spouses of members sometimes just about the transition process. I also am the only woman amongst 500 men in the organization. And so I talk to them a lot about don't make your wife resent you, or, doing this 20-year military career and now you're going to business school and then you're going to be an associate investment banker who works 70 hours a week. Make sure you talk to your wives. And so I talked to a lot of spouses about things like that, what the transition process is like, what to expect, how they can support them.
Yeah. A big part of this podcast has been during the transition, just understanding what is actually going to drive you and your family moving forward, because transitioning from the military, we all have these specific ideals and that we live by and values. But when you transition out, your family, they have more of a vote, and they should have more of a vote. So the fact that, people including their spouses in that decision on what career path they're going to move forward is so integral into people's success, even though it like perceived success we've talked about is maybe just money and a title, but that's not what leads to true success down the line. And you might have 50 or 60 more years with your spouse and with your family, and there's more to it than just what job you're going to get. So that's a huge part that we've been trying to tell people. When you're transitioning out, it's something that people don't necessarily think about.
You should also give 51% to your family and spouse.
Yes. We'll add that to our website. But no, I mean, transition is a family affair because the military becomes as much as an identity to the spouse and family as it does to the service member. Yeah. And so when the service member transitions out, the spouse and the family are losing their community and their identity. And a lot of wives I talk to say the hardest part about transition is that he, being the service member, was gone all the time. He deployed all the time. 6 months out of the year, there were trainings, there were this. And now he's home. And what do I do with him now that he's home? All the time. And so I talk to a lot of spouses about that, because that's a big transition when you're used to kind of parenting on your own and doing things by yourself, and you have your own routine. And now this person is home all the time, and you have to reintegrate them back into your family and, adjust your schedules and adjust the kids and all of these things. So yeah, it definitely is a family affair.
How do you counsel or speak to the veterans who are now home a lot more than, and maybe have some nervous energy around their family, or like becoming another one of the kids that the wife needs to take care of in some respects? How do you counsel those guys to be aware of that and maybe to mitigate that to whatever degree that they can or are aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I tell them, check in with your spouse. A lot of times spouses give up their careers for the military because they can't work because their spouse is deployed, or they're PCSing every, 3 years or something along those lines. Check in with your spouse. See if your spouse has a hope or a dream that they've been wanting to achieve. And now that you're out of the military, they can achieve that. Support them as much as they've supported you. And so I tell them, just to check in to make sure that you're on the same page, that your travel or your next job assignment or what have you is on the same page as your spouse. And just to, appreciate them and be appreciative of the life they've supported you for however many years you were in the military. And now as they support you as you go after your dreams after the military too. So.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm speaking, very personally here as well, but we have this big purpose. We go after something so important, and it really is. But then when you leave the military, you feel like you have to replace that with another thing that's super important. And all of these have a very strong tendency to supersede your family, time with your spouse, and all these other much more important things. But maybe it's ego, maybe it's the personalities that are attracted or whatever. But it's really easy to start trying to place something else in that void that the military left at the expense of the home life and the family. And so I think I love your advice there. Check in, have a regular communication cadence. One thing that my wife and I have started doing, and I think we've done it for the past 5 years almost, but in the military, we're great at creating systems, right? And I hesitate to say it like this, but making a battle rhythm of something that happens on a regular cadence that can allow for better connection with your wife and your kids. And so one thing we do is we call it a life dinner. The first of every month, we sit down, we have a list of kind of categories and questions we go through just to realign and to make sure that we're on the same page going forward. We synchronize on what happened the last month, get synchronized on the next month. And that's had a tremendous impact on our relationship, especially coming off a time when I was gone much more than I was home. And now all of a sudden I work from home. I see her and my son every single day almost, which is phenomenal. But it really requires, to your point, a whole reorganization of your routine and how you interact with each other and communicate, because it's different when, you don't have to just communicate over FaceTime every now and then. It's a daily in-person occurrence, which is great, but has challenges.
Griffin, wait till you have
absolutely.
3 kids. You'll need to do a life dinner every night to make sure that you're on the same page, because with schedules and everything, it just gets absolutely crazy. But you guys have always been great at that. You also do the vivid vision as often as you need to for long-term goals as well.
Yeah.
And I think that is really impactful. What is your guidance for people who have identified a way forward and are seeking that mentorship out once they're a part of your organization? And I think this can be applied to really anybody, whether they're, eligible for 51 vets or not. But how do you guide these people to take the most advantage of the scenario that they're in with this mentorship? Like, what's the best, the key practices, keys to success for really getting the most out of the mentorship possible?
Be specific as possible. We have guys that come to me and they're like, hey, Lindsey, I want to work in finance in Atlanta or the Southeast or the United States at large. And I'm like, okay, like what in finance? Where do you want to live? Where does your wife want you to live? Where do you want to end up? We had one guy who was a member who came to me and said, I want to work in private equity in Montana. And I was like, okay, that is specific. That works. And we got him a job in private equity in Montana. And he's as happy as can be. And so just be specific. The broader you are, the harder it is for someone to help you out. The more specific you are, the easier it is, because they know who to reach out to, how to reach out to them, what asks you're asking. You know, anything from what job you want to work, if there's a job title you want, what firm you want to work for, what geographical location you want to work in, a salary you're aiming for, anything. Whatever ask you have of the general public or a mentor should be as specific as possible so they can try to meet all those needs that you want.
There may not be a great answer to this question, but for that person who's like, I just don't know enough to know to be specific, how would you counsel them, short of just, hopping into a job, figuring it out, seeing how it fits, and then learning more and kind of doing trial and error? How would you counsel them to approach gaining more data points really to inform that decision?
Honestly, be like me and just Google things. When I joined 51 Vets, I knew obviously a lot about the nonprofit sector, working in it for 12 years or 11 years, but I knew nothing about finance and banking, literally nothing. Couldn't tell you what private equity was or venture capital or ETA or anything. And I remember being on our first city summit, and the first one I went on was in San Francisco, and I was in the back Googling what is private equity. And so Google became my best friend throughout the course of the 2 years of 51 Vets. And now I can actually hold a conversation about things. So just do your research. If you don't know what ETA or entrepreneurship through acquisition is, or venture capitalism or anything like that, do your research. There's tons and tons of videos on YouTube and readings and articles that you can read, or podcasts that you can listen to, or anything out there, any kind of reviews or anything that you can look up that can help you narrow down exactly what you're looking for. A lot of people go say investment banking right off the bat because they think it's a lot of money, and they don't realize it's, 70-hour work weeks. And so they go into it and then they pivot because they realize that the work-life balance isn't the best, or they stay in it because they love it. So just do your research. And if you don't know, what you don't know, you don't know. And so that's kind of where a mentor comes in and helps you pick out the specific things you're looking for.
I was gonna bring up the whole Chat GPT counseling that Jack loves to talk about, but at the risk of beating that dead horse, I'm sure a number of the mentors as part of 51 Vets would be more than happy to. You sound like there were a bunch of internships that people do through the program. I'm sure the mentors would allow people to shadow them for a day or a week just to kind of see a day in the life of what they're doing. I think any way that people can have these little prototypes of the life that they're considering or their career field that they're looking at, I think the more the better. And to your point, you can start off with a cursory Google search or ask ChatGPT to ask you the questions about the industry and kind of help inform what you're looking for. But as you triangulate closer and closer into what seems to be a fit for you, just having some sort of little prototype or shadowing that specific role seems to be a great approach. I wanted to, not to completely pivot here, but we are talking about the transition for a lot of people, which is a complete career transition. And you took a complete career transition when you found out about your husband's injury. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of what was going through your head at that time, how you approached? Was it an immediate, like, you found out this news, you saw how people supported you and your family, and then you immediately pivoted? I think just hearing a little bit more about your story and how you processed that and maybe made some decisions along that trajectory that could help somebody else going through a major transition like that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I worked in nursing, left nursing because my husband at the time was stationed in 7th Group and there were no jobs in Crestview, Florida. And so I stayed home. I was pregnant with our first child and got a call from him. I was supposed to hear from him. He was on a mission, and I didn't hear from him for a few days, which was very unlike him. And I was coming home from Thanksgiving break, and I was at the airport, and I got a call from a random number, and I'm very sarcastic if you can't tell. And I picked up and I was like, whoa, look who it is. And the first words out of his mouth were, "You need to know I'm alive." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You need to know I'm alive." And I said, "Okay, you're alive." And he proceeded to tell me that his best friend had been killed right next to him. And he was shot carrying his body to the medevac. And that a few other members on his team were also injured. And so there was obviously a communication blackout while they notified the next of kin. And I said, "Okay, so you're going to Germany." He was shot in the back. And he goes, "No, I'm not going anywhere." And I said, "You're not coming home?" And he said, "No, I'm not leaving my team. I'll recover in country. I'm in Kandahar and they'll take care of me. I'm not going anywhere." I said, "You're not coming home?" Like, I couldn't fathom why he wouldn't come home. And he said, "No, I'm not leaving my team." And so, and one of his team members ended up coming home and going to Walter Reed. And the support, and I'm not knocking nonprofit organizations, but the support he got from simply crossing an ocean and going to Walter Reed while being injured, compared to the support that our family got, which was zero, when they were equally as injured, was baffling to me. And I couldn't comprehend it. I had no family. I sat next to the wife of the teammate that was killed as they were notifying her. And it kind of clicked for me right then that there's not enough support in this area. And if you don't cross the ocean to Walter Reed, you don't get anything. You don't get any monetary donations. You don't get flights for your family. You don't get anything from the government. You get nothing. And you're left with the scars and wounds of war, just as anybody else who was injured. And so that was my mission, was to set out to change that, to work with nonprofit organizations so that they're aware, to support families of those that are injured but choose or do stay in country. And so that was kind of my mindset, was to change that shift. It was at the height of the war. Special Forces was taking a specific hit during this time. And it was every month we were losing somebody from the Special Forces Regiment. And so I kind of made it my mission to support the families and the families at home that didn't have any family nearby. And that's how it all kind of started. And then it snowballed from there. And here I am.
Was that essentially an immediate pivot as that was
Yes.
happening? You very
Yes,
quickly.
I remember yelling at the commanding general at the time, who called me after he was shot and told me that he didn't want to come home. And he was like, he's telling us that he doesn't want to go to Germany. And because they asked me if I had a passport to meet him in Germany. And he said, he's not coming home and he doesn't want to go to Germany. And I remember screaming at him and being like, this is completely unacceptable. How can he not go to Germany? You know, how is this even an option? And him being like, ma'am. And I was like, and I didn't care that he was, you know, a one-star general in charge of everything. Like, I absolutely did not care. The Boston in me came out in full force during that time. And so, yeah, so that was an immediate shift. And that like a couple weeks later after the funeral is when I contacted the Green Beret Foundation to start supporting spouses. So it was pretty immediate after that.
It's so unfortunate that obviously people have to deal with those tragedies, but to talk about that response, like I'm sure other people have said like, great job, but like it is truly a remarkable response on your side to take that. And some people just take that and go, you know, oh, woe is me. Like, let me just feel bad about my situation. But you kind of grab the bull by the horns, and it's remarkable that you just took active steps and then pursued the right thing. And that's helping people down the line to make sure that they didn't have that same experience. That's really phenomenal.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a wild ride, but it's definitely been worth it. I'm very thankful to be where I am now and what I've been able to achieve and do since that time.
I imagine, I mean, you had sunk a lot of time, a lot of experience, obviously, into becoming a nurse, and then to pivot immediately, that had to have been a scarier, nerve-wracking period of time just in general. Do you have any, not to perfectly recall what was going through your mind at that time, but do you have any advice for people that are like, I have a sense of what the direction is that I need to go? It maybe financially doesn't make 100% sense. It may not be what all my friends are doing, going to work in investment banking or whatever, but if they have a sense of what that direction is, how would you counsel them to go that direction, go after it in light of the apprehensions they may have or what all their peers might be doing or saying?
So I counsel a lot of people that are interested in going into the nonprofit space. And the first thing I always say is people don't work in nonprofit for the money. They work in it for the cause. And so if you have a cause that's passionate to you and you truly believe in it and you want to enact change and, you know, are passionate about what you do and you want to love what you do and feel good every morning when you wake up because you're doing something that you love to do, then go after it. Money is not a factor. And so I always tell people I did a stint in sales because I thought money was a factor for a year, and I was absolutely terrible at it and hated every second of my life. in corporate America. And so I know that's not for me. So when I counsel people that are interested and they're weighing their options, but they're interested in going into nonprofit or, public policy or something along those lines, I say go for it. If the biggest thing, you work your job most of your life, it takes up most of your time, and you should be doing something you love that you're passionate about, whether that be investment banking or working in a nonprofit. But as long as you're able to get out of bed every morning and absolutely love what you do, then you should follow that.
Our generation, I feel like, the pendulum is shifting over to, the idea of success is more like buying your time back, enjoying what you're doing, and like kind of not necessarily fighting for a cause, but like just doing what you want to do with your day. Like that's, we've had a guest on here that kind of identified that as success, is just being able to wake up and do what you want to do. And you're right. For some people, the strive is what they want to do. The investment banking, the 70 hours a week, that just gets them motivated and they love that. And that's not to, discount that idea, because there is money involved with that sort of decision. But if you choose what you're going to be able to do every day, you're going to be better at it. You're going to be able to come to work and just dominate because you're actually enjoying it. And two, the money will come. That's kind of been our advice too. It's like, it's either money enough to sufficiently support your family will probably always be there, especially if like just who we're dealing with getting out of the military. Hopefully people have that baseline set of, their resume is good enough to be able to get a job that's at least going to support their family. But you got to do what you want to do to be able to get up every day and be happy and not just, oh, the giant plane just flew right over my house, if you guys saw that. But yeah, no, it speaks to everybody that we're trying to communicate with. Like, transition is not just a money-seeking adventure. Do what's going to make you happy every day.
I thought that shadow was just a bald eagle, Jack, just a Hawaiian native bald eagle.
No, we are right next to Barbers Point, the Coast Guard airfield here, and they bank right over my house. So,
Lindsey, what are some of the key areas that are in need, or maybe that need additional resources or attention for people that are getting out? You mentioned, some organizations work on grad school applications, interview questions, those sort of things, and you guys work on connections. Are there other things that are maybe overlooked that people don't spend enough time or attention on as they're leaving the military?
I think it's starting to get more attention. I've seen it uptick a lot in the last, I'd say probably a year and a half, 2 years. But mental health is a big one. And when you're in the thick of things and you're in the military, your adrenaline never slows down because you're deploying and you're doing things, or you're training, and your adrenaline is constantly up here. It's constantly high. And then you get out of the military and it just nosedives because you're home every day, you're working a 9 to 5. There's really no adrenaline that goes along with it, unless you're like a stockbroker on the trading floor. But yeah, so mental health has become a forefront in a lot of people's minds with transition and the battle of, PTS and what that looks like when people get out, and the support for them. And there's different nonprofits that have been established to support mental health specifically in the military as they transition out, which are fantastic. But just mental health and how it affects the family as well. And, how it affects the service member, yes, but also how it affects the family. And so there's a nonprofit called the All Secure Foundation, which is great. They offer retreats around the US, and they do spouse retreats. So it's for the service member and the spouse. And they do workshops, and they're a great nonprofit. And so there's a lot of them that work on that as they transition to a new job, a new way of life.
Would you recommend, or have you seen people that, I think a lot of folks getting out are probably in denial that they need any sort of mental health assistance? Have you seen people that maybe don't acknowledge it or don't have a pressing need for some sort of counseling, but still go anyways as almost a preventative measure?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And I think that's super important. And I think every member should have some sort of out counseling of some kind when they leave the military, just as a check-in to see how they're doing, because it's not involved right now with the out processing of the military, but it should be. They should have a mental health check-in to see how that person's doing as they transition out. I think that's something that needs to be involved in. They have TAPS, which is a terrible program. They should add mental health counseling into that. But there's different nonprofits that specifically support mental health. There's a nonprofit called Shields and Stripes that's run by actually a friend of mine that supports the military at large and first responders. And they do physical fitness and occupational health and mental health and everything. And it's a whole holistic approach. And a lot of those guys have transitioned out and kind of have hit that wall and realized they need help. And so there's nonprofits that exist. There's Home Base in Boston, which is a great program as well. So there's a lot that are coming out of the woodwork, so to speak, to rally around mental health and transition and support people as they get out of the military.
Yeah, so important. Thanks for mentioning those organizations, by the way.
Yeah.
So as we kind of start to wrap up a little bit, one two-part question that we ask every guest is one ask and one give. And we can start off with what's one ask, one way that somebody listening to this could help you or your organization or provide value to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. They can support our members. We're always looking for partners. If they're in the finance and banking realm and they're listening, we're always looking for partners to join, to meet, to support our mission, to mentor. We're also always looking for nonprofit organizations to partner with so that we can offer our members more of a holistic approach and cover down what we don't cover. And so if there's a nonprofit out there that does resume reviews or does stuff with spouses or something like that, wants to partner with us, I'm always looking for outside entities to help support our members and their families at large.
Nice.
And then on the give side, you've given a lot already, and your organization does nothing but give to service members. But if there's anything else you'd like to add, you're open floor.
Yeah, no, I think just giving back to the community that has given so much, and realizing that transition is not easy. A lot of people, or civilians alike, think that changing jobs is hard, but they don't understand what goes into being in the military, the identity, the purpose, the teams, everything that goes into being a part of a community for X amount of years, especially if you're getting out at that 20, 30-year mark. I mean, that's been your whole life. Mm-hmm. And so having empathy, I think, is something that we can give a lot of service members as they transition out. That is probably the most important. And it's empathy with everything from resume writing to using civilian jargon and terminology to having, meaningful networking conversations, things like that. But I think empathy goes a long way with transitioning military.
I referenced this earlier. I hope that there's more people with the height of the last 20 years. Hopefully there's more people in those sectors that can provide, a little bit of empathy and understand because they've been exposed to it. But the percentage of that is still all too small. Some people, the likelihood of them even being associated with somebody in the military is somewhat rare even nowadays. So anybody who can show empathy for their situation, that's going to be the right way as an employer or as a neighbor. It's like, it's not just your work, right? Like when you get out of the military, you start to realize, oh, all right, like my neighbors mean more to me now too, like, because they're going to be around for the next 10 or 20 years.
And because I actually see them now because I'm home.
Yeah, exactly. My neighbor asked if I dyed my hair yesterday. I was like, no, I didn't dye my hair. It's just a little longer because I'm finally out of the military and I can grow out the sides. It's not a skin tight fade anymore.
Lindsey, I'd like to take the opportunity just to say thank you for what you do for the military community, for having the nerve to transition from a nursing career into what you have done for the last over a decade and the countless lives you've influenced as a result of that. I mean, it means a ton. And I'm sure that no one truly can see or fathom the actual impact that you've had on so many families. So thank you for that and for what you continue to do in the way that 51 Vets supports the veteran community in such an incredibly important way. So I guess any final thoughts or any last piece of advice for someone that either is currently going through a transition from the military or is considering that path or has already gone through the transition but is trying to find their way in the world after service?
Yeah, of course. Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for having me, and thank you both for your service as well. I appreciate it, and thank you for your kind words. They mean a lot. My advice for a transitioning military would be to find your community outside of it, whether that looks like a nonprofit organization, a group of friends, a mentor, etc. Your community can truly save your life. And I've seen it happen countless times. Those buddy checks, don't isolate yourself. That's probably the biggest thing that I've seen go wrong with veterans that transition out of the military is they isolate themselves. And it's the time where you need your community the most. And so lean on people, whether that be joining a nonprofit, whether that be finding a mentor, whether that be connecting with other veterans, et cetera. But just find something that gives you that sense of purpose to continue your trajectory and to continue your life in a meaningful way.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.